Did you know that beneath Birmingham's most popular park lie unmarked graves of miners never counted as human? That Alabama ran a system so brutal it made slavery look like practice? That 6-year-old children were worked to death in mills? I've spent months in archives, walked forests where locals report screams, stood over rivers holding the dead. What I found isn't easy to share. This isn't shock value. It's memory. People whose names were erased, suffering buried, deaths called accidents. Alabama is beautiful. Alabama is also a graveyard, and some of what's buried is still screaming. Before we begin, subscribe. This work takes months. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's get started. 35 Red Mountain Park, built on a death industry. Birmingham's Red Mountain was mined from the 1870s to the 1950s, producing iron ore that fueled the South's industrial boom. At least hundreds of miners died in collapses, gas leaks, and explosions. Many were never documented because convict laborers were not counted as workers. They were property on loan. The park today sits atop unmarked mine shafts and forgotten graves. Families still do not know where their great-grandfathers are buried. Mining records show cave-ins were reported as incidents, not tragedies. The mountain remembers what we have tried to forget. 34. Convict leasing, slavery by another name. Alabama pioneered convict leasing after the Civil War. By 1898, 73% of state revenue came from leasing prisoners to coal mines and farms. The system was simple and brutal. Black men were arrested for vagrancy, loitering, or for looking at someone the wrong way. They were fined amounts they could not pay. Then they were sold to companies like Tennessee Coal and Iron, and they were often worked to death. Court documents show men sentenced to 90 days who never came home. The state did not call it slavery, but the chains were real. The whips were real. The graves were real. 33. Coalburg Prison Mine, where men were buried alive. In Coalburg, Jefferson County, prisoners mined coal underground while chained. There is no easy way to say this. Cave-ins killed dozens. Bodies were often left behind and sealed in tunnels because retrieving them was expensive. The mine is now abandoned, with human remains likely still inside. I have researched the archives, and what I found were incident reports written in cold bureaucratic language. One report read, "Tunnel collapse. 3 convicts lost. Recovery not attempted. Not attempted. Just sealed." Families were told their sons and fathers died, but they were never told where. 32. Sloss Furnaces, industrial death factory. Between 1882 and 1971, Sloss Furnaces employed thousands. Official records list 47 deaths, but historians believe the real number is far higher. Molten iron, explosions, and falls killed workers regularly. According to witness testimony, men fell into furnaces and were lost. No body to recover, no funeral to hold. Workers believed the site was cursed. Today, it is one of the most reported haunted places in the South. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the death toll is documented. The screams were real. 31. Birmingham Jail, where Dr. King was caged. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed here and wrote "Letter from Birmingham Jail." The document is famous now, taught in schools, but people do not talk about the conditions. Cells were overcrowded and unsanitary, and they were used to break protesters psychologically. Men and women were packed in, denied medical care, and beaten. The building was later demolished, and the suffering was erased with it. No marker, no memorial, just a parking lot where people suffered for demanding basic human dignity. I've stood in that parking lot. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet, unremarkable. Cars were parked where cells once held people who changed history. There is no plaque, no acknowledgement, just asphalt and silence. It is impossible to stand there and not think about what was erased. Some cities preserve their shame. Birmingham paved over it. 30, 16th Street Baptist Church, terror as architecture. On September 15, 1963, a Ku Klux Klan bomb killed 4 girls. Addie Mae Collins, 14 years old. Cynthia Wesley, 14. Carol Robertson, 14. Denise McNair, 11. It was a Sunday morning. They were in the basement putting on their choir robes. The bomb was placed under the steps, timed to maximize casualties during services. The explosion was so powerful it blew out the face of Jesus in the stained glass window. No one was convicted until more than 40 years later, long after evidence had decayed, and after witnesses had died. The church still stands. The basement has been preserved. You can still see the crater where innocents died. 29. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, blood on concrete. On March 7, 1965, state troopers beat and gassed peaceful marchers on this bridge. More than 50 people were hospitalized. Witnesses testified that troopers attacked without warning, fracturing skulls with billy clubs, and trampling marchers with horses. The day became known as Bloody Sunday. According to court documents, officers were told to use whatever force necessary. They did. And here is what makes it worse. The bridge is still named after Edmund Pettus, a Confederate general and Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon. People walk across it every day. Blood and honor, same concrete. 28. Wetumpka Crater, a cosmic graveyard. Wetumpka sits on a 5-mile-wide meteor impact crater formed 83 million years ago. The impact shattered the landscape and left unstable geological faults beneath the town. Buildings still collapse in patterns locals can't explain. Sinkholes open without warning. Foundations crack along invisible lines. Geologists have mapped the fractures, but the ground keeps shifting. It's as if the earth itself hasn't healed. The town sits on ancient violence, geological trauma that predates humanity. And somehow that feels appropriate for Alabama. Even the land carries scars. 27. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment, medical murder. From 1932 to 1972, the United States government let 399 black men die untreated as part of a documented government study to observe syphilis progression. The Public Health Service told these men they were receiving free health care. They were a lied to for 40 years. Even after penicillin was discovered and proven effective, doctors withheld care. Many wives and children were infected. A multi-generational crime committed in the name of science. The records showed doctors knew exactly what they were doing, and they documented the suffering clinically, like lab rats. The experiment only ended when a whistleblower leaked it to the press. 26. Old Bryce Hospital, where patients disappeared. Opened in 1861, Bryce confined thousands for mental illness, poverty, or simply being inconvenient. Patients were sterilized without consent, lobotomized, restrained for weeks, and buried in numbered graves when they died. More than 4,000 deaths occurred on site. Many graves remain unidentified. According to hospital records, causes of death were listed as exhaustion, melancholy, or simply unknown. Families were told their loved ones had passed peacefully. They were not told about the restraints, the experiments, the screams. I have walked the grounds of Old Bryce. The main building still stands, abandoned now, windows dark. There is a cemetery on the property. Rows and rows of small stones with just numbers, no names. I counted over 200 in one section alone. The wind moves through there differently, colder, heavier. It is the kind of place that makes you understand why people believe in ghosts. Not because of supernatural nonsense, but because some suffering is too enormous to simply vanish. 25. The Dadeville Dance Studio shooting. On April 15, 2023, a Sweet 16 party became a massacre. 4 people were killed, 32 were injured, mostly teenagers. Phil Stavius Dowdell was 17. Shankivia Nicole Smith was 17. Marcia Emmanuel Collins was 19. Corbin Domentre Holston was 23. The shooting started just after 10:30 at night. Witnesses testified that multiple shooters opened fire into a crowd of dancing kids. The building was a community symbol, a safe place where families celebrated. Now it is a trauma landmark. The blood has been cleaned. The bullet holes have been repaired. Dadeville is a small town. Everyone knows someone who was there. Everyone carries it. 24. Talladega National Forest, bodies lost forever. Multiple hikers have vanished in Talladega National Forest since the 1970s. Search teams report no tracks, no clothing, no remains. Nothing. According to search and rescue records, people simply disappear into dense ravines and sinkholes that can swallow a body in hours. The forest spans over 393,000 acres, terrain so thick that helicopters cannot see the ground. Caves that have not been fully mapped. Some families are still searching decades later. The forest keeps what it takes. 23. Lake Martin, a drowned town. Built in 1926, Lake Martin flooded entire communities. Homes, cemeteries, and churches were submerged without exhumation. The dam was needed for hydroelectric power, so the residents were relocated, but the dead stayed behind. Divers still find coffins and headstones underwater, preserved in the cold and dark. According to historical records, families were told the graves would be moved. Many were not. They are still down there. Towns with names like Coahuila and Cherokee Bluffs rest beneath 44 billion gallons of water. The lake is beautiful. People boat on it, fish in it, swim in it. They do not know they are floating above graveyards. 22. Mobil's slave port. The last ship. The Clotilda, the last known slave ship to arrive in America, docked in Mobile in 1860, 52 years after the international slave trade was banned. It illegally carried 110 Africans, kidnapped from what is now Benin. They were hidden in swamps, then sold. The ship was burned and sunk in the Mobile River to destroy evidence. For over a century, it was a ghost story. Then, in 2019, marine archaeologists found the wreck, proof the crime was real, proof the law was ignored, proof people were bought and sold in America long after it was supposedly illegal. 21. Africa Town, built by survivors. Clotilda survivors founded Africa Town themselves after emancipation. They bought land, built homes, preserved their language and customs. It was an act of defiance and survival. But by 2020, residents had cancer rates far above the national average due to industrial pollution from nearby chemical plants and paper mills. A town born from slavery was poisoned again. Different century. Same disregard. The pattern is always the same. Use people. Profit from them. Discard them when convenient. 20. The Alabama State Capitol, built by forced labor. The Alabama State Capitol was constructed in 1851 using enslaved workers. They quarried the stone, laid the foundation, and carved the columns. Their names were never recorded. The building later became the site where Jefferson Davis took his oath as Confederate president in 1861. Freedom and bondage occupy the same steps. Today, tourists take photos on the front portico. Tour guides mention the architecture, the history, the importance. They rarely mention the hands that built it. According to construction records, enslaved laborers were classified as equipment, not workers. When one died, he was replaced. The Capitol still stands as a monument to democracy. It is also a monument to the people who built it in chains. 19. Kilby Prison, Alabama's execution hub. From 1901 to 1965, executions were conducted at Kilby Prison in Montgomery. Alabama's electric chair, Yellow Mama, originated in this system. Court records document executions that took 15 minutes. Men convulsed as electricity burned through them multiple times. These were officially labeled as botched executions. Witnesses reported visible burns, and the conditions were described as unbearable. Guards had to leave the room, but the executions continued. Kilby processed death like a factory line. Efficient, brutal, legal. 18. Yellow Mama, the chair that burned men alive. The electric chair executed 125 people in Alabama. Witnesses reported smoke rising from bodies, screaming that continued even after the first jolt, and overwhelming odors. The chair required multiple attempts for some executions. Men were declared dead, then found still breathing, then electrocuted again. It's now in a museum, sanitized, silent, behind glass. But it's real. The leather straps are original. The wood is stained dark. You can still see the burn marks. The museum treats it like a historical curiosity. It is not. It is a torture device that was used within living memory. 17. The Scottsboro Boys, children on death row. In 1931, 9 black teenagers were falsely accused of sexual assault against 2 white women on a train near Scottsboro. The youngest was 13 years old. 8 were sentenced to death within weeks. The trials were so flawed, the case went to the Supreme Court twice. According to trial transcripts, the defendants had no real legal representation. All white juries deliberated for hours, not days. The evidence was contradictory and eventually proven false. One of the alleged victims later admitted the accusations were lies. But by then, years had passed. Lives had been destroyed. Some of the Scottsboro boys spent decades in prison for a crime that never happened. 16. The Black Belt, a name born from slavery. The Black Belt region gets its name from the dark, fertile soil that created plantation wealth. It also created the highest density of enslaved people in Alabama. Cotton made fortunes. Slavery made cotton possible. Today, the Black Belt remains one of the poorest regions in the United States. According to census data, poverty rates in some counties exceed 40%. The soil that made white families rich now grows nothing but soybeans and poverty. Same land, same people, different chains. The wealth extracted from this region during slavery was never returned. The descendants of enslaved people still live here, still poor, on land their ancestors worked for free. I've driven through the Black Belt multiple times. The towns are small, roads are cracked, homes are falling apart. But you still see plantation houses, preserved and pristine, turned into museums or bed and breakfasts. The contrast is obscene. Grand columns and manicured lawns across the street from trailers with tarps for roofs. History is preserved selectively. The big houses are saved. The slave quarters are gone. And the people who live in poverty now are told to just work harder, as if centuries of theft can be overcome with effort. 15. The Selma lynching era. Between 1880 and 1930, Alabama recorded hundreds of lynchings. Dallas County alone saw at least 20 documented cases. Many sites were never marked, just remembered in silence. According to newspaper archives, lynchings were announced in advance. Crowds gathered, photographs were taken. Bodies were left hanging for days as warnings. Some victims were subjected to additional violence before death. Others were killed in ways designed to maximize suffering. These were not spontaneous acts of mob violence. They were community events, planned and public. And almost no one was ever prosecuted. The message was clear. Black lives could be taken without consequence. 14. The Phoenix City Vice Empire. In the 1940s and 50s, Phoenix City was run by mobsters. Gambling, prostitution, and murder were openly conducted. Police officers were assassinated if they did not cooperate. Judges were bribed. The city was lawless. According to court records, the corruption was so complete that the governor declared martial law in 1954. He sent in the National Guard to reclaim the city. Troops patrolled the streets. Businesses were raided. Arrests were made by soldiers, not police, because the police could not be trusted. It took military occupation to restore basic law and order. 13. Redstone Arsenal, Cold War burial ground. Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville was used for chemical weapons testing during the Cold War. Nerve agents, mustard gas, and biological weapons were stored and tested here. According to declassified documents, some agents were buried on site when they could not be safely destroyed. Contamination zones still restrict public access decades later. The soil is poisoned. Groundwater is monitored. The full extent of what is buried there remains classified. Redstone is still an active military installation. People work there every day, walking over ground that contains weapons designed to kill thousands. I need to pause here for a moment. This research is not easy. Most people will not talk about these things. Archives resist. But if this matters to you, if you believe these stories need to be told, please subscribe. It is how I can keep doing this work. Let us continue. 12. The Huntsville prison hangings. Before the electric chair was adopted, public hangings occurred at the prison in Huntsville. Crowds gathered to watch. Parents brought children to witness the events. According to historical accounts, executions were community events. Vendors sold food, and people picnicked as if at a fair. Hangings became normalized death, entertainment disguised as justice. Some men died quickly, others died slowly. The executions were not always quick or merciful. The crowd watched it all. Execution as spectacle. Suffering as civic duty. 11. Bankhead National Forest, the forest that swallows sound. Locals report hearing screams, gunshots, and seeing unexplained lights in Bankhead National Forest. Multiple unsolved murders have occurred here since the 1970s. Search teams often find nothing. No bodies, no evidence, no resolution. The forest is dense, full of caves and ravines. Sound does not travel right. You can scream, and no one will hear you 50 feet away. According to law enforcement records, people have vanished during daylight hikes. Cars are found abandoned, keys still in the ignition, doors open. The forest does not give answers. 10. The Alabama River, a moving grave. Enslaved people were thrown into the Alabama River during transport. When boats were overcrowded, or when people became sick, they were simply discarded. Modern divers still find chains and bones in the riverbeds. Archaeological reports say the river does not give up its dead easily. Sediment preserves what should not be preserved. Shackles corroded but intact. Bones scattered across miles of riverbed. The river carried cotton and commerce. It also carried bodies. And it still holds them. 9. The Anniston chemical disaster. Monsanto dumped PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, in Anniston for decades. The company knew the chemicals were toxic. Internal documents prove it, but profit mattered more than people. Blood tests in residents showed PCB levels 3 to 5 times normal. Children were born with defects. Cancer rates spiked. The town became a Superfund site in 2002. Monsanto paid settlements. But money does not remove chemicals from blood. It does not undo generations of poisoning. Anniston is still contaminated. People still live there. They do not have a choice. 8. The child labor mills. In 1908, Alabama had over 20,000 child laborers. Some were as young as 6 years old. They worked in textile mills, coal mines, and factories. They worked 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. According to labor records, many died or were crippled before reaching adulthood. Fingers lost in machines. Lungs destroyed by cotton dust. Spines bent from carrying loads their bodies could not handle. The mills made fortunes. The children made nothing. Their childhoods were stolen for profit. 7. The civil rights cold cases. More than 20 murders remain unsolved from 1955 to 1968. Witnesses died. Evidence disappeared. Justice expired with time. According to FBI case files, investigations were deliberately sabotaged. Local police refused to cooperate. Prosecutors declined to charge suspects everyone knew were guilty. The Ku Klux Klan operated openly. Bombs were planted. Churches were burned. People were shot in their homes. And the system protected the killers. Some cases have been reopened. A few convictions came decades later. But most will never be solved. The murderers died free. 6. The Montgomery bus boycott backlash. After Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, the Montgomery bus boycott began. But so did the terror. Bombings targeted black leaders' homes. Martin Luther King Jr.'s house was bombed while his wife and infant daughter were inside. According to police reports, no one was convicted for years. The bombings continued against churches, homes, and businesses. Terror became the enforcement mechanism. The message was clear: demand equality, and you would be killed. The boycott succeeded, but the price was blood. 5. The Bibb County mine disaster. In 2001, an explosion killed 13 miners at the Jim Walter Resources mine in Brookwood. Federal inspectors had cited the mine repeatedly for safety violations. According to court documents, the company knew the risks and chose profit over safety. The explosion was preventable. The deaths were avoidable. Fixing the problems cost money, so they did not fix them. 13 men went to work and never came home. Their families received settlements, and the mine later reopened. 4. Alabama's prison death rate. By 2022, Alabama had the highest prison suicide rate in the United States. Federal judges described conditions as unconstitutional. There was overcrowding, violence, and a lack of medical care. According to court testimony, men die waiting for care that never comes. Infections become sepsis. Treatable illnesses become fatal. Mental health crises become hangings. The prisons are death traps, and the state keeps filling them. The pattern continues. Different system, same disregard. 3. The ghost cemeteries. Roads and malls cover burial grounds across Alabama. Some cemeteries were moved, others were simply paved over. Historical societies say families still search for ancestors with no markers. Construction crews occasionally unearth bones. Sometimes work stops. Sometimes it does not. The dead are anonymous now. Graves under parking lots. Bones beneath highways. Memory erased by asphalt and concrete. 2. The pattern. Slavery led to convict leasing, which then led to mass incarceration. Industrial pollution follows black communities. Neglect is systematic. Different centuries, same system. Different victims, same geography. The tools change, the oppression does not. Alabama did not bury its history. It built on top of it, and the foundation is still rotting. 1. The state that keeps burying. Alabama is forests, rivers, and small towns. It's also chains, graves, and erased names. I have walked through it. I stood on ground that holds secrets. I have breathed air that carries ghosts. The land remembers even when we do not. This is not about hating Alabama, it's about seeing it clearly. The beauty and the horror exist together. You cannot separate them. The magnolias bloom over graves, the rivers run over bones, and until we stop burying the truth, we will keep repeating it. Some places remember. Alabama is one of them. The question is whether we are brave enough to listen. If this changed how you see Alabama, or the South, or American history, I need to hear from you.